Magic has now released two major Marvel sets, and hidden within those two sets, we have received two Infinity Stones. Marvel Spider-Man gave us the Soul Stone, and now Marvel Superheroes has introduced the Mind Stone. So at this very moment we have received two of the 6 Infinity Stones. Which means we are still missing the Power Stone, the Space Stone, the Reality Stone, and the Time Stone. And that made me wonder, what if these stones are not simply individual cards? What if they are quietly showing us what the next Marvel sets could be? Hey everyone, and welcome to Whole Priority. Today I have a theory. Nothing in this video has been confirmed by Wizards. I don't have any secret information. I am simply looking at what we have received so far, looking at the Marvel characters and teams that are still missing, and trying to connect the remaining Infinity Stones to possible future sets. Some of these predictions feel surprisingly convincing, one of them is definitely weaker than the others, and then at the end, there is one final possibility that could bring all of these Marvel sets together. So let's start collecting some stones. Last year, we received Marvel Spider-Man, and somewhere within that set we found the Soul Stone. Then Marvel Superheroes arrived and introduced the Mind Stone. That gives us 2 sets and 2 different stones. Now, this does not automatically guarantee that every future Marvel set will contain another one. The remaining stones could appear in commander products, bonus cards, secret layers, or something completely different. But placing a different Infinity Stone inside each major Marvel release seems very deliberate. And Marvel still has several enormous corners of its universe that Magic has barely explored. So for this theory, I'm going to assume that the 4 remaining stones will each be connected to another major Marvel set, starting with the prediction I feel most confident about. The Space Stone belongs to Guardians of the Galaxy. This one almost feels too obvious. The Guardians are one of Marvel's most recognizable teams, and yet they were largely absent from Marvel Superheroes. We have not properly met Star-Lord, Gamora, Rocket or Groot, Drax, Mantis or the rest of the team. And well, they are the Guardians of the Galaxy, they travel through space, their stories take place across different planets, civilization and cosmic battlefields. A Guardian set could take us to Nowhere, Xandar and the Nova Corps. It could introduce characters such as Yondu, Nebula and Ronan, and it could explore the Kree, the Ravagers and all these strange creatures and locations found throughout Marvel's cosmic side. Mechanically, there's also plenty for Magic to work with. Spaceships could become vehicles, Rocket could care about equipment and artifacts, Groot could interact with plants, counters or the graveyard, and the Guardians themselves could encourage a colorful collection of legendary creatures that somehow work together despite having very different personalities. The Space Stone would fit naturally into that world. So my first prediction is a Guardians of the Galaxy set containing the Space Stone, and honestly, I would be surprised if the Guardians did not eventually receive a dedicated Magic set, regardless of whether my Infinity Stone theory is correct. The next missing stone is the Reality Stone, and for this one, I think Magic could explore the Marvel Multiverse, more specifically something inspired by What If. The entire concept of What If is built around changing reality. What if Peggy Carter received the Super Soldier Serum instead of Steve Rogers? What if T'Challa became Star-Lord? What if Ultron won? What if the Avengers became zombies? These alternate realities give Wizards an opportunity to revisit familiar characters without simply printing the exact same version again. We could have Captain Carter instead of another traditional Captain America. We could see Strange Supreme, Infinity Ultron, Marvel Zombies, different versions of Thor, Spider-Man, Black Panther and the Avengers. And because Magic already allows us to have multiple cards representing the same legendary character, a multiverse set would work incredibly well. It would let Wizards take characters we already recognize and ask, what would this person look like in a completely different reality? The Reality Stone could even interact with alternate versions of cards, transformations, copying or changing the rules of the battlefield. There are so many strange directions they could take. And of course, there's one very appropriate Thanos quote for this particular prediction. Reality can be whatever I want. So my second prediction is a Marvel Multiverse or What If set containing the Reality Stone. My third prediction is the Power Stone, and I think it could belong to the X-Men. Now, we have already seen some mutants in Marvel Superheroes. Wolverine and Storm are both major X-Men characters, but there are still so many important mutants missing. We have not properly seen Professor Xavier, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Beast, Nightcrawler, Magneto and the Brotherhood of Mutants, and that's only scratching the surface. The X-Men have more than enough characters, locations, and stories to support an entire set by themselves. We could visit Xavier's school for the gifted youngsters. We could see the Danger Room, Cerebro, the Sentinels, and Genosha. We could receive different versions of existing characters as well. Instead of simply printing another card called Wolverine, Wizards could give us Logan, Weapon X or Old Man Logan, or even different version of Jean Grey and the Phoenix. But why connect X-Men specifically to the Power Stone? At first, the answer seems simple. Mutants have powers. But I think there is a more interesting connection. The central conflict in X-Men is always about how power should be used. Professor Xavier believes mutants and humans can coexist. Magneto believes mutants must use their powers to protect themselves, and sometimes to rule over those who fear them. Humanity is frightened by mutant power. The mutants themselves constantly struggle with controlling it. So, the Power Stone would not simply represent physical strength, it would represent the question at the heart of the X-Men. What should someone do when they possess extraordinary power? This prediction is not quite as direct as the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Space Stone, but I still think an X-Men set is extremely likely. And if Wizards wants to pair each major Marvel property with a stone, the Power Stone feels like a strong thematic match. That brings us to my weakest prediction, the Time Stone. My first thought was the Time Variance Authority. Through the Loki series, we were introduced to the TVA, an organization that watches over time, monitors anomalies, and protects what they call the sacred timeline. We have variants, branching timelines, temporal doors, pruning, and entire worlds existing outside normal time. The thematic connection of the Time Stone is obvious, but I'm not completely convinced that the TVA alone has enough characters and locations to support an entire large Magic set. We have Loki, Sylvie, Mobius, Ravonna, He Who Remains, Miss Minutes, and the TVA itself. There's definitely material there, but compared with the X-Men or Guardians of the Galaxy, it may be too narrow. So perhaps the TVA would not be the entire focus. Maybe it would act as the framing device for a much larger Marvel time travel set. The TVA could guide us through Marvel's past and future. We could see Kang and his different variants, Cable and Bishop, Days of Future Past, Marvel 2099, future versions of familiar heroes, ancient versions of characters we already know. The set could jump between different periods of Marvel history, while the TVA attempts to stop the timeline from collapsing. That would give Wizards much more room to work with. And it would make the Time Stone feel like the center of the entire conflict. So my fourth prediction is slightly less specific than the others. A Marvel set built around time travel, alternate timelines, and the TVA, containing the Time Stone. This is the one that I'm least confident about. Doctor Strange would also be an obvious home for the Time Stone, and perhaps Wizards has an entirely different idea planned. But a TVA-led journey through Marvel's timeline still feels possible. There's one major complication with this entire theory. If Wizards follows the Stone's most famous appearance from the Marvel films, the pairings might be completely different. The Power Stone was central to Guardians of the Galaxy, the Reality Stone was connected to Thor and the Dark Elves, the Time Stone belonged to Doctor Strange, and the Space Stone appeared as the Tesseract throughout several Avengers stories. So Wizards could simply follow those established associations, but I'm not sure they will. Magic sets need enough characters, factions, locations, and mechanical ideas to fill an entire release. That means Wizards may choose to connect each stone to a property based on its wider theme, rather than where the stone appeared in a specific movie. That is why I connected space to the Guardians, reality to the multiverse, power to the X-Men, and time to the TVA. Not because those are the only possible answers, but because each stone represents something central to that part of Marvel. And now we arrive at the final part of the theory. Let's assume that I'm right. 4 more major Marvel sets are released. Each one introduces another Infinity Stone. Eventually, all 6 stones would exist in Magic. What happens then? Because Thanos does not simply collect all the stones and place them in a binder, although I suppose that would make for a rather relatable Magic player. He places them inside the Infinity Gauntlet. So, could Wizards be building towards one final crossover set? An Infinity War set? A set that brings together characters from Spider-Man, Marvel superheroes, Guardians of the Galaxy, X-Men, and the Multiverse, and every other corner of Marvel that Magic has explored? That could be wherever we finally receive the Infinity Gauntlet as a card. Perhaps he could care about controlling all 6 stones, perhaps Thanos could search for them. Perhaps assembling all 6 would create an enormous effect. Hopefully not one that requires us to remove half our commander pod, although I would not put it past them. This set could contain the Black Order, the Battle of Wakanda, the events of Infinity War and the final battle from Endgame. It could feel like the conclusion to an entire sequence of connected Marvel releases. And from a commander perspective, building a Thanos deck that actually tries to collect all 6 Infinity Stones sounds incredibly fun. Probably slow, probably impractical, but incredibly fun. So these are my predictions. The Space Stone in Guardians of the Galaxy, Reality Stone in Marvel Multiverse or What If set, the Power Stone in an X-Men set, and the Time Stone in a set built around the TVA and Marvel's different timelines. Then, once all 6 stones have appeared, one final Infinity War set containing the Infinity Gauntlet. Again, nothing has been confirmed, I may be completely wrong. Wizards could reveal the next stone in a set that none of us are expecting, but the fact that we now have received 2 Marvel sets and 2 different Infinity Stones feels like the beginning of a pattern. And if it is a pattern, then the remaining stones may already be telling us where Magic is traveling next. But I would love to know what you think. Which Marvel property would you connect to each of the 4 missing stones? Would you swap any of my predictions around? And do you think Wizards is actually building towards an Infinity Gauntlet card? Let me know your theories in the comments. And until the next time, play Magic, tell stories, and hold priority.